Welcome to a special crisis edition of the Collingwood Rant. I'm Sly.
And I'm Bucks. Bucks, can you hear me? Slobbo. Sorry, Spooko, Slobbo, Robbo.
All right, so big news today. This probably dropped unexpectedly on everybody who wasn't in the know. There was talk that Buckley might stand down within the next couple of weeks, but for it to emerge today was just very surprising.
Have you ever listened to that really highly entertaining show that's available on YouTube and podcast called the Collingwood Rant? And this particular date and time for the departure was flagged a couple of times. Did you ever listen to that bit?
No.
No, I don't want to pump up anyone's tyres, but geez, those guys are good.
Yeah, they are good. They also have a working internet connection.
What? What'd you say? Can you hear me?
Anyway, so what did you think of Buckley's resignation?
Honestly,
going into this season, did you think?
No, hang on. Sorry, when I paused and said honestly, and you were supposed to say, yeah, please. I'll tell you what I felt. It was just an enormous sense of relief, and I'm probably going to be dirty about feeling that, but that's just the way it is. There's been a number of changes that Collingwood have had to make this year, and so far they're all rolling out as I would have hoped, and this is another one. I'm going to proclaim that I love the bloke. He was a great player, et cetera, all the platitudes are out there to read. However, though, my first immediate thought was, thank fuck, now we can move forward again. I'm sure that won't keep everyone happy, but that's just the way I personally felt.
I was just actually surprised that, it really, we all knew, well, I shouldn't say we all knew, but many of us expected this was going to happen, but came straight after a win. We was really waiting for it to come after that belting and all that sort of thing. And he resigned. And the club handled it with class, as much as Mark Robinson tried to mess it up. I don't know if he genuinely had an internet connection problem or if he's just an idiot.
It's a combination hard to stream certain questionable videos online at the same time as you're doing a Zoom conference. But by Christ, there's certain people that'll give it a go.
But like you, I do feel a relief, and now it's about time we can start to look forward rather than. And I said this. Probably last year, at the end of last year, this was a big caretaker year, which really infuriated me from the point of view of, hey, what's this year going to stand for? And it's really felt the whole time like it's standing for just, hang on, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know what's happening with our president. We don't know what's happening with our admin. We don't know what's happening with our coach. It's like everyone was waiting for pieces to move into place, but no one was actually willing to move those pieces. You go to even Jeff Brown, and he's really waiting on David Hatley to push the EGN. Brown's not doing anything about that. So it's like everyone's just in this limbo. So it's actually good now that they can start looking forward. But, in terms of Buckley as a coach, how would you rate his tenure? Caroline Wilson wrote a really good article today speculating on what might have been had he not taken over. We've heard during that transition that Buckley inherited something of a cultural mess that was left for him to clean up, but we've also heard that he possibly didn't handle that as well as he could have, and that bled into different relationships and saw quite a few players leave the club.
Well, yeah,
acrimonious circumstances.
You saw Dale Thomas tweet very briefly today, put out your fig jam jars in support of Bucks, which, it's a tongue-in-cheek comment, but you can read a lot into that about how he chose to celebrate the exit of someone that he clearly had issues with.
Well, the two things I really remember of Thomas, we were talking about this earlier, was early game during Buckley's coaching against Richmond, where Thomas kicked a goal on the run from 50 and then pointed at the coach's box. And I do recall it was probably the year earlier, he was on, what was that show with Peter Hellier before the game, whatever the hell it was called, on Channel 10. but they had
I don't watch shit shows.
But before,
except for Star Trek Discovery.
but they're talking to Dale Thomas, and they sort of asked, how do you feel things will go with Buckley? And I can't remember the exact line, but Dale Thomas said something like, I know the meetings will be long. And he said it in this rueful voice, but again, just reading the tone and the body language, it was almost like, I like what we have now, but I don't like what I'm previewing. And then you get other players who've obviously left. Dane Beams is reported to have left because of issues with Buckley. Darren Jolly issued a salvo when he was cut from the list. You have a number of players who've, after they've departed the club, have sort of looked back at the club and, I'm just trying to be very diplomatically correct, but they've issued parting shots. So I do wonder about the relationships and how that worked, particularly over a 10-year period. Obviously, there's certain players who had really good relationships with him, like Scott Pendlebury. Scott Pendlebury was left none. Were you aware of that? He's never gone through a sacked coach except for 2011.
He must have been asleep when Mick left then. Well, was he on holidays or annual leave or something? Yeah, I found that statement a little bit bewildering. But anyway.
I can only imagine when Mick left that, they told Pendlebury he's leaving on the Sunday, and Pendlebury just going, walking around. And then, come Friday, they said he's left. And Pendlebury was like, oh, well, I wasn't here and I didn't see it, so I wasn't left numb. I was expecting it to happen on the Sunday.
Well, so, either that or he came into training and said, where's Mick? And they all said, he's gone to doggy heaven.
He's gone, yeah. But in terms of this 10 years, would you consider it a waste?
Yep.
Would you consider it not just a waste? So like a lot of clubs appoint coaches and it doesn't work out. And a lot of clubs have gone longer than 10 years without a flag. Hello, Carlton. And Essendon. So everyone's just trying to get it right. And obviously it's the whole confluence of circumstances you need to get right, including player management, salary cap management, recruiting, training, all that sort of stuff. But in terms of Buckley, do you look back at 2010 to 11 and sort of think there was probably another flag at least in this group?
Oh, absolutely. I'm firmly in the camp that if it wasn't broke, don't fix it. I mean, whatever agreement was in place should have had a clause that says, if by some fucking chance you win a flag and then you front up into the following year and look like the most dominant thing on the planet, maybe we should rethink this arrangement. Why fuck with a period of success? And yet we did. It was a staggering decision. And at the end of the day, it would have probably served him better to go off and maybe entertain one of those other roles. And they would have probably looked at him. Mick had a use by date on him, but fuck, I would have let him go through and win 4 more flags with us, have a dynasty, and then just put his feet up. And then you could have just tapped Bucks on the shoulder and say, look, seriously, North Melbourne, are you in your right head? Come back to us. And it would have happened regardless, I think.
Oh, look, I mean,
inside of that.
You look at the romanticized thing about, a club champion coaching the club he played for to success. And obviously that's the fairy tale, but you look at someone like Lee Matthews. He never got back to coach Hawthorn. Now, was Hawthorn poorer for that? I don't know. Was Lee Matthews poorer for that? I wouldn't say so. He got the coach 4 flags, So I think you're totally right. They should have, at that time when they won that flag, just said, hey, we don't win many of these things and things are going pretty well now. Let's just leave it. And going into the following year, they were in cruise control. And that mess that we referenced earlier that Buckley inherited, that might not have happened had the status quo remained. And you just look at that 2011 grand final side. I mean, the average age was 26 years of age. But I mean, you got some top end players like Tarrant, Leon Davis, Ben Johnson, Lee Brown, Jolly, who were 29 and over. You had Alan Didak, who was at 28. But given they'd introduced that sub rule, he probably could have played, for another 3 years as a specialist sub at the very least. He seemed to be another one who was driven out pretty quickly. Andrew Cracker, he was 28. Leon Davis obviously left after that grand final, but he's on record. You can find that interview on YouTube where he said if Mick stayed, he would have stayed. Dane Swan, Luke Ball were 27. So you would have thought, barring injuries, they would have had at least another 3 to 5 years in them. Heath Short, well, we know how long he's had. He's had all Australians. Travis Clegg was only 24. He was the premier power forward in the competition at that time. Horatio Lumumba was only 24. Thomas and Tuvi were 24. Tuvi's career was pretty much cut down by a knee injury a couple of years later. Thomas really struggled. When he went to Carlton, it was almost like his heart wasn't in it anymore. Chris Dawes, he had a couple of really good years, but then Buckley played him as a ruckman forward in 2012, and he was only had about 48 games at that time. It was sort of a very taxing responsibility for a young player. And then you get guys like Pendles at 23. We know how well he's done. Wallingham, 23. Ben Reid, 22. Blair, 21. Sidebottom, 20. Fasolo, 19. Nathan Brown was also 22. So he was around there at that age. Dane Beams, he didn't play in that grand final. So he would have been, what would he have been, about 20 also. So you had a really young list. And again, you have those sliding doors things. What would have happened had Malthouse stayed? How many of these players would have Malthouse got more out of? Would we have had all the injuries that we had? You know, Buckley did have a pretty heavy training regime in 2012. And for the first 4 years or something, we had a horrific injury run under Buckley. So you don't know. I mean, and obviously, you know, if we're speaking about all this, things might have went the other way. Maybe it would have been even worse. We don't know. But speculating on...
I'm just going to say, though, just listen to it again. It's fucking depressing to hear it.
Well, we've had discussions with people in the know who feel, not in the know, sorry, but credentialed people who feel that our time had come already at that point. So we're at the rejig, and they point to things like, well, Jolly was going to, you know, he was 29, so he only had a couple of years left in him. I mean, because obviously you can't go out and trade for another ruckman at all. You know, and Didak was 28. But it's like, when I'm looking through this list and thinking, well, you had Nathan Brown to come back, and, you know, Leon would have stayed another couple of years, and you had Beams, and, you know, so you had a few players still in the, you know, Elliott came in the next year also, so he would have been there on the Malthouse as well. So you had players coming through, and like Hawthorn did during that period where they three-peated, you could have identified needs and went after whatever you didn't have. But
absolutely agree. Yep.
Given you had Nathan Brown, Ben Reid, Chris Dawes, and Travis Cloak as your spine, and they were all really young, you know, barring injury, they might, under, you know, a different coaching regime, they might have fared a lot better. And the one thing I do recall is I recall in 2008 when Shane Maitland and Simon Prestigio came out, it looked like they were sort of coming to the end. Went to dinner with some football friends that, you know, I used to go to games with in the 90s. And just I recall one of them saying, because we're going through that sort of rebuild transition at that point, he just goes, under Malthouse, I have every confidence defense will be fine. He goes, that's not going to be a problem. And that was when we were just starting to bring these young guys in. So guys like Reid and Brown might have had much more, you know, much more credentialed careers had they played under Malthouse. But, you know, yeah, but in terms of what is, you look at the 10 years and you think, okay, 2 years in the finals, they really never looked the dominant side in each of those 2 years in 12 and 13. Even though they finished fourth in 12, they never really played that sort of football that they had played in 10 or 11. And I mean, I know you're big on rebuking this theory that people had worked out the game plan.
Yeah, I don't buy into that. And even if they did, if you're still executing it better than everybody else, what's the problem? I think that's just an easy shutdown argument for people to sort of cover the change from Mick to Bucks.
Well, I actually look at it and think it's seriously, what's the right word? A lobotomized argument. It's really got to be a moron to make this argument. It's like 2018, and then obviously we've trended down since 2018. And again, what's the argument? Oh, clubs work this out. And 2010, 2011, oh, clubs work this out. Yet Richmond's won 3 flags playing the same brand of football for the last 5 years. We all know what they're doing.
No one's worked them out.
We all know what they're doing, but no one's doing anything about them. No one's done anything about, no one did anything about Hawthorn. Now, everyone knew how Hawthorn was playing during their free-peat. Everyone knew about how Geelong was playing. So, I mean, as you said, if you can execute your game plan to its fullest potential, you're going to give yourself every chance of winning. I think that's a massive cop-out. And I think the truer reality is that in 218, we've talked about this so often for the last few years, and now everyone else is jumping on board. They played an exciting brand of football, but in saying that also, that brand of football they played brought guys like Cox, Myercheck, De Goey, Hoskin Elliott, Thomas, all those smaller forwards into the game, all those mid-sized forwards into the game. And since they abandoned that game plan, every single one of those players, other than
vanished.
Myercheck to an extent, have vanished. And it's like,
well, even Myercheck, he's just nowhere near his dominant little self. No. He's a fucking cameo player at the moment.
Yeah, and it's like, well, hang on, that shows you how much strategy can maximize a player's output and potential. Mm-hmm. And this is the thing I think was really squandered during the Buckley era. There was just that 4-year period outside of the finals. It just felt like, I'm trying to be nice again, pissing away the best of guys like Pendles and Daisy and Swan and Heater and Cloak. And, some of those guys would leave. And instead of getting the best out of our list, and even someone like Jared Blaise, I'm always point to, he, for limited talent, he was still quite a, he took the game on under Malthouse, and he just didn't do it as much under Buckley. And I just do wonder how much his coaching strategies and tactics asphyxiated players to the extent that we didn't get to see the best of them, or they didn't get to see the best out of themselves.
Well, I mean, you've seen even in the modern group now, there's scuttlebutt and rumor and all that sort of stuff suggesting that certain players weren't happy under Bucks, and you think some of them were seriously not devoid of talent, but playing like they're not happy. It'll be interesting to see post this, and even though it's Harvey carrying the reins for the rest of the year, that it'll be interesting to see and plot, hopefully, some of the resurgence of the good core group. If they all start playing really well again, it's going to be a little bit of a talking point, I would think.
Well, without naming too many names about where you got the intel, I mean, you did get some insight into what happened at Carlton when Bolton was given the boot and Teague took over, and the change of mindset that happened there within that club.
Yeah, which was just quite simply that I was I hate to say this in public, but I was invited to a Carlton function and talking to a player. And I asked about what was the transition from Bolton to Teague like, and he said that Bolton was it was like working with someone at NASA essentially. It was all these concepts, none of them could fairly understand, and they played pretty much as such. And then when Teague come along, his belief was just, well, if you're good in a particular position, go out and do your thing, play on instinct. And back yourself, all those other sort of wonderful buzzwords. And right away, Carlton started playing better football. Obviously, they're not at the moment. And injury would be a lot of the reason for that to some of those key blokes. But it really is sometimes it's a case that some people see the game as something that needs to be broken down into 48,000 different moves. And not every player out there has the ability to absorb all this and understand it. They'll nod their head politely, I'm sure. But when it comes to executing it, you get that stuttering moment, like where of the 47,000 things am I meant to be doing now, instead of what your instinct is telling you is to maybe kick it long or keep the ball moving forward or whatever. It gets stymied. You saw some of that alleviated in the Crows game on the weekend, where they sort of they were just backing themselves, and sometimes it might be as simple as that. And it'll be interesting to see whether Harvey brings that too. And look, and the bloke, the thing is, like, Harvey's been there now 7 centuries or something. I think he was there with the Rosetta Stone initially at Collingwood, but. Whether he sees himself free of the shackles, I mean, the thing I see with Harvey is there's no chance he's going to get the job. He's going to have to use the next half of the season maybe as an audition tape for other clubs. But even then, I think he's going to be probably in struggle town, and he won't be retained. Certainly, I don't think at the end of the year by anyone who's coming in. So what would you have to lose? Wouldn't you go out there and try and make the bestest impression you can make?
With surely, the way I look at it, hang on, we'll talk about Harvey in a minute, so we'll come back to Harvey. It's good. I just want to bring up some stats quickly. In 2010, we had 2,349 points for and 1,658 against. And 2011, we had 2,592 points for and 1,546 against. So going to 2000,
that's better than our last 3 years combined.
Well, going to 2012, we had 2,123 points for. So that's 2,100. That's 450 or so points less than the previous year, which is 70 goals less effectively.
It's a big difference.
It is a huge difference, and that was in the way they shifted the way they changed the way they played. And in 2013, they went to 2,148 points. So that's a continuing decrease. So in 2010-2011, they played that really, although they were extremely aggressively defensive side of the press, it created a lot of turnovers and it created a lot of goal opportunities. So we scored pretty freely in all those games, and that's why we had, we're that sort of percentage, which didn't just come from, keeping teams down and wisely scores. It was we were scoring freely also. And going into, the end of 2011, just before that final round against Geelong, when they sort of Collingwood waltzed in and, really just didn't care, we were sitting on 181.7%. which is just an insane percentage. So Buckley brought a distinctly and a surprisingly defensive game style to to Collingwood. And if you go to 2018, where, we might have lost the grand final, we only had 2046 points for. So that's even further down on our couple of years with the premiership squad under him. And obviously, the game changes and it goes through defensive shifts and all that sort of stuff. But I think it just shows that the mindset was always defend first. Don't let goals through, defend first, and, keep the opposition down to a score that you can manage to get yourself, rather than, hey, we're going to defend frenetically, but we're also going to try and score as much as we can. And we saw that. And in 13 and 14, in 2012 and 2013, it's not like they really lost that much personnel compared to the two previous years. So I think there's a very telling shift in what happened there. And talking about Harvey, what you've just mentioned there, I think surely Graham Wright or someone there has tapped him on the shoulder, said, you're going to be caretaker coach. You do what you want to do. Because if we wanted to see you do what Buckley was going to do, we would have just kept Buckley for the rest of the year as the caretaker. So you go for it. And we want to see some of these kids play freely and openly and attackingly. So think of this as your audition for not only this job, but you can now show the rest of the competition why you are a potential senior coach, because there are going to be a couple of positions that open over the next couple of years. And, Harvey might be like, the Port Adelaide coach, Hinkley. Hinkley was an assistant coach for about 113 years. And I think when he didn't even want to go for the Port job because he said he was just sick of doing interviews and never getting anywhere. So that might be Harvey. And in the end, we might find, he's actually not a bad coach. And the one thing when you look at sort of the reports of the coaches, because there's always opinions about the assistants and all that. And it's like, well, we don't really get to see them do their thing. We get to see a reflection of what they do because they might coach a certain line or something like that. But, we really don't know what they have and what they can offer as senior coaches.
No, that's a good point. Maybe he might even shake it up next year if he got the job and bring Buckley as an assistant coach, keep Sando on.
Well, I don't want to see it.
Then they could be signed up for 10 years. That'd be awesome, wouldn't it?
That would be awesome. No,
it would be the Collingwood way.
Just on the press conference too. I mean, seriously, Mark Robinson, get your fucking shit together. Honestly, that for and Buckley handled it with class. You know, he just sort of laughed it off until the end where he said, "Can we mute him?" And I think about
mute or nuke.
Neuter. So it doesn't breathe. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I misheard.
I think there's a very slim chance of that ever happening.
Yeah, they mostly. What was that line? Oh, I can't remember. No, Back to the Future. Quick, before he takes human form. So these are the candidates that the AFL website has listed. Alistair Clarkson.
Throw them at me.
Alistair Clarkson, contracted until the end of 2022.
Easily fixed.
Yep. And he's been in the system for about 17 years himself. So you're really going to have to query.
17, huh?
Yeah. So you're really going to have to query, do you still have the passion and the fire to rebuild? He's meant to have had a falling out with Wright, but obviously that can be fixed. My biggest concern...
Is that... I haven't heard that. Is that true?
Yeah.
Falling out?
Yeah, it was mentioned on some podcast that wasn't ours. It's all true on the internet.
Was it on the Hawthorn Rant?
Yeah, it probably is. Look, everything I've read on the internet is true, including how they faked the moon landings 6 times. So Clarkson, the question they really do need to find out is, look, do you want to do this for the next 5 years? Do you have the passion? Do you have the fire? And we are a little concerned because you've coached Hawthorn the last 4 years and they've been shit. So do you have anything else to offer? Mm-hmm. So I think they're the 2 queries with him.
Yep, fair.
Ross Lyon.
Pass.
I would seriously consider Lyon. My biggest query of him is, from what I've heard regarding Fremantle, is they didn't feel...
Can I just interject here, and can you just text me the number of your analyst? I think I need to make an emergency call.
What analyst?
Yeah, please continue. Yep.
Ross Lyon. I've heard like Fremantle didn't feel he could rebuild the club, which is why they moved him on. That's getting scuttlebutt. Sam Mitchell. So he's obviously the heir apparent at Hawthorn, but if they stick with Clarkson, he might just say, well, I want to go elsewhere and coach. He's got 4 years of coaching under his belt across 2 clubs.
West Coast and the Hawks, yes.
Including 2021 as coach of Hawks VFL affiliate Box Hill. So got no idea, if he can coach, but he seems pretty well credentialed. Michael Voss. Allegedly, the article claims that he was the pace setter at Carlton before they went for David Teague. Has been Ken Hinckley's right-hand man across the past 3 seasons and has poured his energy into upskilling his coaching resume with various courses and programs, and is seen as a fantastic builder of relationships. Would certainly fit the mold of high-profile coaches the Pies have craved in the past.
It would almost be poetic justice to take on someone who destroyed you in 2 grand finals as coach Collingwood. But no, I don't think so. Look, maybe it's just that some people are particularly well suited to being a support act, not the head coach. I mean, the time at Brisbane didn't go well, but then again, to balance it out, like Lepage was crucified in a similar manner at Brisbane, and he now talks and presents quite well. Maybe you've got to give them some capacity and acknowledge that they've learned from their mistakes. You've cited Matthews several times from his book where he looks back at his time at Collingwood and thought there's a lot of things he could have done and should have done better. And he took that learnings in Brisbane and look what happened there. Look, I mean, it's easy, I suppose, for me to fob them off. Your gut says they're really not interested, but they've probably got justifiable cases to present.
Yep. And we'll get back to that in a little bit too. Robert Harvey. So we've already talked about him. This season marks Harvey's 13th in the coach's box, split across 3 clubs: St Kilda, Carlton, and the Pies.
So what, he's done 13 years at Collingwood and 12 minutes somewhere else?
Oh, well, I think it's a bit rich calling Carlton the club. Adam Uze from Adam Uze, along with Sam Mitchell, sits among the top candidates, has been a big part of Melbourne's rise up the ladder this season. It's like everyone's getting credit for Melbourne's rise up the ladder this year.
Only this year, though.
Spent 212 to 220 at Hawthorn under Alistair Clarkson, and has held roles as assistant coach, strategy, and opposition analyst, and worked across different areas in development. Seen as one of the sharpest minds in the game, and interviewed for the Adelaide job won by Matthew Nix.
He was also good in that movie, Teenage Mutant Ninja 2, Secret of the Ooze.
I think I just want him to just coach so we can just keep messing up his name. Scott Burns. So
yeah, look, I'm done with the favourite sons next.
Daniel Giansiracusa was among the final candidates for the North Melbourne job and has taken over a decimated Essendon backline this season. Was named 2020 AFLCA Assistant Coach of the Year while with the Western Bulldogs, and has won praise for his ability to build strong relationships with players after entering the coaching ranks. Has also coached his own team, taking Footscray to the VFL finals in his first year at the helm in 2019.
Interesting.
And that's the ones the AFL's got listed. But then you got guys like Blake Carousella. And then you also have to career. Is there someone you can just poach from another club? Could you go poach?
I think, I think it's great that the AFL took some time to put that together. But surely, don't you go to the source of all truth these days and see what the sports bet odds are saying about who should be coached? Isn't that the origin point for all sorts of manner of truth?
Yeah.
So okay. just to quote him here, I've got the odds handy because I'm a big betting man. Sly, ever since Stevenson taught me about the wonders and joys of betting, he motivated me to take on as a hobby something I didn't even know existed. Despite the multitude of fucking advertising every 8 seconds. So sports bet saying that Sam Mitchell, $5. Robert Harvey's paying $5.50. I think that's his own money. Ross Lyon, $7. Clarkson, 21. Sportsbet obviously don't rate him. And Dane Swan comes in after that at $41.
I think I'll go for Swan.
So I think if you're a betting man and you like Spook's tips, and why wouldn't you? Because I've never given you any before, that I'd be loading up on Swanee as a quiet outsider. I think he could be a chance here. Wouldn't you? He's just had a kid. He's looking for an excuse to get out of the house.
Well, it could be a chance. Ultimately, we don't really know a lot about the assistants because they're unknown quantities to the punters.
That's it. I think that's it. It is in a nutshell. You and it all comes down to, is Collingwood going to be experimental enough to take their bet, to hedge their bets on another unknown? I would consider Bucks at the time a massive unknown. I think, wouldn't they be gun shy about doing this again?
Oh, well,
even though they tried to make it work for 10 years.
I mean, one of the criticisms people have another of the criticisms people have of the transition or the succession is, well, Buckley didn't go through a genuine interview process. And it's like, come on, you've seen him speak. Seriously, you don't think he would have fucking just totally nuked that? He would have totally aced it. So that's the other thing to consider.
I think surely that whole interview process would have been, he was taken to a room, he was asked the first question, he just whipped the phone out, rang Ed and said, "What's going on?"
No, but I'm saying he would have, if he went through I don't know what happened in terms of the succession. Obviously, well, not obviously, but speculation is there was none of that happened. They just gave him the reins. But I'm saying if he had to go through that rigorous, vetting process, he would have been fine. You've heard him speak. He doesn't get flustered that often. He's generally very articulate and thoughtful. So, I mean, I think it's like a cautionary tale too. I'm not just saying this about Buckley, because there's plenty of coaches who've gone through that process and then proven as coaches they're not that great. So there's a big difference between theory and the practice. So in terms of the practice, what do you want to see from whoever our future coach is? Because I've jotted a few things down here.
Flags, that would be the first thing.
But in terms of the characteristics,
and then second would be flags, and the third one would be more flags.
In terms of the characteristics,
characteristics. So, can we I'll backpedal for a second. I'm not sure whether you're going to bring this up, but there's been a coaching review panel
assembled,
the Collingwood's put together. So there's Mark Anderson, Licker. Who was the other two that were named?
Oh, there was one space open.
Yeah, there's one space open for a potential. I guess that it would be an external, but there was. I mean, they're all two of the board members. Who's the other one? Fuck.
Doesn't matter. Move on.
No,
move
anyway,
on. Hurry.
I'm going to move on. But surely that what we're about to talk about now about what the key sort of indicators you'd be looking for is. I just wanted to say that actually when that group came out, I can't remember half their names. It did read quite impressively, like they're taking it seriously this time. When was the last time that Collingwood ever put a panel together to obtain a coach? I think it was, they set their sights on Mick back in probably, like, you would have been sounding him out probably in 98 and locking the deal down in 99.
But they were after Dennis Pagan first, so that didn't work out. So then they moved on to Mick.
Okay, so but yet they had goals in mind. So, but they wouldn't have brought anyone else into interview as a parallel to that. They would have just said, "Well, this is who we're hunting. If you don't come, I'm going here," and you've said yes, job done. The same with the transition to Buckley is you've not really done anything other than the fact of, well, you're it. What's the sense of going through a review process? So that you're looking back now in a couple of decades where what we're doing now is what everyone else is doing, which is good, but it's almost an unheard of thing at Collingwood that they're going to put a board together to review the cases, which means that they may have a quarry in mind that they're going to try and pursue, but at least they're looking to see what the alternatives would be. And I think that's the smarter way of doing it, because you could come and say, you over there, AC, the heir apparent to the job at Collingwood, and he may come in there with that belief that my CV does the talking for me. But at least you're looking at a whole bunch of other people that are potentially hungrier, who may present a whole bunch of new ideas that you could actually probably look at and go, fuck, actually, that sounds interesting. Do we go with what we initially thought was a gut approach, or do we maybe roll the dice in a different direction? At least it sounds like they've got options open this time. And I was really, really encouraged when I read that today, that they put that panel together to review the next position.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you've just pointed out,
Murphy was the other one that's on the panel as well. So Murphy, Anderson,
from RoboCop,
Licker, and somebody else. Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of like what I want, and this applies in regards to even if they get an experienced guy like Lyon or Clarkson or whoever, I want someone. The first thing I got to ask him is, why are you going to be the next premiership coach at Collingwood? What are you going to bring to this club that is going to give you the edge over the competition? Because seriously, you got to have a vision as a fucking coach. If you just say, yeah, I'm going to come in, I'm going to rip off Richmond and just do what they do, and we'll see how that goes, I'll just say, yeah, there's the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out. You really need someone who has his pulse on the game and understands, I need to find the next evolution, because that's been happening consistently over the last forever. The premiership coach is always someone bringing in something a little bit new, a little bit edgy. When they, again, you look at Richmond, they played the chaos football. Bulldogs had that, mad, fanatical attack out of defence, and, all the slick handballs. Geelong had the globe-trotting handball style. Hawthorn had that short surgical kicking. So every premiership coach has something, unless you play Collingwood, then you can just do what the fuck you want. But so I really ask, look, hey, what's going to be your plan? And something else is, you need someone who's not going to, what's the best way of putting this? Not going to fall victim to the Collingwood hype, because they're going to have to deal with a lot of pressure, and they seriously need to be someone who just turns around the playing group and says, look, it's not to the playing group, sorry, to the club itself, and just go, look, you're actually a pretty fucking unsuccessful club in the last 60 years.
Yep, I absolutely 150,000% agree on this. I mean, anything that's said and thrown the way of anyone who comes in, and they shouldn't be a part of our history in any respect. should be saying, you've done what in the last fucking 70 years? Shut
Yep.
up.
Yeah,
You
and
know, nothing, none of it matters. None of it at all matters an iota because you've tasted success twice.
yeah, and you've imploded
Yep.
straight after both occasions. You know, we've
Yep.
talked about this previously too. I mean, you know, in terms of you look at the Collingwood people have taken over as Buckley bottom four, Tony Shaw wooden spoon, Murray Weedman wooden spoon, and then the outsiders have been Matthews and Malthouse. They won flags, and you know, Hafey took in the 4 grand finals. And you'd have to think these guys who weren't part of the Collingwood culture came in and just sort of said, well, I understand everything that you believe makes this club great, but there are different ways to do things and we need to change this up. And that's why those people have succeeded, whereas the others have not succeeded. So I really want someone who's not only going to see Collingwood for what they are, but also never fall victim to that fucking hype. You know, I don't want in 3 years.
Shit out.
Yeah. And I don't want in 3-4 years for them to be uttering all the same shit that, you know, we're hearing now from the club, like Annette, you know, saying a couple of years ago, premierships aren't that, you know, it's not all about premierships. It's like, oh, fuck off. You know, if I had the power, I would have sacked him right then. So
but the thing is, and just to go off on a tangent for a quick second, is that this is the perfect fucking year to start that launch too, is you've had the cataclysm of events, even though when you hear Ed talk about it, it's all wonderful. That we've had this sweeping broom of change. The thing that I've been calling for a little while now, that it needed to happen. It's great that it finally has. You've got to capitalize on this. The whole culture of Collingwood, I don't want to use the word it's a joke, but it's a joke. And it's time to actually take assessment of where you're at as a club and what the fuck do you want to be moving forward. You know, do you want to be, do you want to live the fucking bluster you keep telling us about without backing it up? Reset. This is the perfect reset that you can now next year launch and make Collingwood whatever you choose it to be, and hopefully that's a successful entity again. And that's not measuring success in terms of how many bread rolls you give to people or how many variations of the sport you can make people wear a black and white jumper to. Your core deliverable is the football.
Yeah.
And look, and I'll even include the women's football in there because that's probably been the most exciting thing that Collingwood's done in the last couple of years that looks like it's going somewhere. And you'd be looking at that seriously saying, if this thing over here that is growing and getting traction, and they look like they're going to actually do something in terms of bringing a flag home, fucking hell, look for that to inspiration. If not your tragic history, but look at what can be achieved with little funds, a whole bunch of dedicated people, and a drive to succeed and passionately want to win. That is your motivational force right there that you need to bring back into the core side of things. It's a perfect time to reset across the board and start this club anew and be what it is that it needs to be. And that's the biggest thing in the country. And I can go back to all my schoolmates that I left in grade 3 and fucking start bragging again for all those things that were denied me.
Yep. Just that panel will go back. It consists of Mark Anderson, Graham Wright, football director Paul Lucuria, and fellow board member Peter Murphy.
Yep.
And there's going to be one more person they'll add to that. Hopefully it's Eddie Maguire. No, wait, sorry. Take that back.
Maybe it's going to be David Hadley.
Oh, I'll take his opinion
over
Eddie's.
But no, it's surely you go to someone like Dunstall or something like that. Someone who's done this 100 times before. Even
someone
Paul
else
Roos or something like that that you speak highly of.
The left one, the left field one I'd throw in there is Mick Malthouse.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You're fired. The other thing too, whoever they bring in, I want to know if this person can build relationships with all the players, not like the ones who think like him, but not just the ones who think like him, but the ones who are the larrikins, the ones who are super focused, the ones who are, whatever the case is, I want them to find a way. And Malthouse was good at this generally. Obviously, there's a couple of players he had issues with, but and I'm sure that is at every club because you're not going to get along with everyone. So there's always going to be a couple who fall by the wayside, as long as that doesn't become the ongoing thing. But Mick was great at, getting the best out of the guys who were super focused, the guys who were relaxed, the guys who, bit of the, like I said, the larrikins and all that sort of stuff. He always found a way to reach most of these people, and he got the best out of them on the football field, and the best example I always point out is the 2003 grand final. We went into that grand final as favourites, and we had a playing list. If you look at it, there were guys like Ben Kinnear, who was the third forward. We had Jason Cloke and Tristan Walker up as, forwards, at Matt Loken. And there was others in there. I'm not trying to disrespect these players, but I'm saying they all were pretty limited in their scope. And Mick got the very best out of them to, propel Collingwood into a grand final as favourites. So
yeah,
I want to see, I want to see whoever comes in too. So, and I feel that's something, again, from the outside looking in and from hearing things from the people that we do hear things, that Buckley wasn't as good with that. He wasn't as good as connecting to people who weren't thinking or who didn't think like him. So those sort of players did tend to fall by the wayside or get driven out. And the best examples, someone like Dane Swan, we all know sort of he's a bit of a joker off field and all that, and he might have a, let's say, relaxed lifestyle, I guess. Once he walked out onto the field, he was a champion. And it's like, well, you know what? Whatever you're doing is not affecting the way you're playing. So fuck, just keep doing what you're doing. As long as it's not derailing anyone else, I'm happy for you to play, to do whatever you do. Whereas it just feels like now, or in Buckley's tenure, a lot of players are just dragged into the whirlpool of this is the way things are going to get done. And while a few, some of them might have enjoyed that, it feels like others either didn't, or it smothered them, or it just, really drained the life out of it. Anyway, I mean, that's just my speculation, but I want to see the next coach be able to connect with everybody.
Yep, agree. And I think a friend of ours that I was talking to today made a point about saying that, one of the things that he sort of felt has clearly been absent from the club is that sort of embracement of, the previous sort of superstars. You don't see any of them coming back to the club in any capacity as, skills. Like you can imagine, like if you brought Dids in to mentor Dacos or something like that, or you had Tarrant come back and do some work with the defenders.
Just on that, you do realise Josh Dacos' father is Peter Dacos.
If he's
going to get mentored, no. So you don't want Peter involved. You'd be sick.
How many people listen to their fathers? But
yeah,
you know what I mean.
Skywalker did. But you know who didn't? Ben Solo. Anyway, go on.
But yeah, it's like that whole thing about, there's an element of need there clearly too, that you want to see some representation of some past players coming back and doing work with the club. I don't recall seeing that. I mean, who's really, and I'm talking about like coaching roles or anything specific like that, but it's just like the presences that sort of need to be there at training and helping out, Nick
Maxwell
you've had The Rock there for about 20 years, just doing whatever he's been asked of. But there's no sort of fulfilling a specific need. And I think, look, I actually, it's a romantic notion, I think, at the end of the day. But I actually, when we were talking about it, I thought, it's not a bad point.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Maxwell sort of spearheads something like that, where there's a former
player here's in the box. Yeah, so that's actually, it's justification there, I guess, that they're at least identifying that sort of need moving forward. And I think it's a good thing to have some of that there. I don't want any of them in positions of power or anything like that, because I want that slate to be clean, but I want some of that attractiveness of the past players to come back and talk their experiences, ply their wares, help out where they potentially can, even if it's a couple of hours a week or something. I think it's still a good sort of look.
Yeah, I mean, one thing there though too is and this is not Buckley's fault or anything. Since they moved to North Bank in 2000 and, they train at Gosh's Paddock, whatever the hell it's called, and they're at the Lexus and all that, they've really sort of lost a lot of their identity. And that's happened with a lot of clubs. And then I saw Matthew Lloyd, and I really rate Matthew Lloyd as a football analyst or commentator on football, because he doesn't seem to get sucked into any hype. He just says straight what's on his mind. And And he was just talking about how Essendon, Rudden's brought him back to Windy Hill to train there like 1 day a week. And he goes, it's just awesome. He goes, there's just this, feel of reconnecting with the ancestral home and, embracing what Essendon is. And I think Collingwood lost that, whether Eddie Maguire was, right to move us from Vic Park. I don't know what the alternatives were at the time. It does feel that early in his tenure, when we went from Vic Park to the Lexus Centre, and we changed the jumper and all that, it felt like this club lost a lot of its identity and a lot of its connection to history. And the thing of history is, I think you always have to be careful with history, because, one of the big problems with Collingwood is they use history to talk about how fucking great they are today. And it's like, okay, you're on 15 flags. 11 of them came in the first 40 years of your existence. So great, and I think you can really respect history without using it to boost your stature in the present. And I think that's something we've lost, is just that connection with who we used to be and what we want to be. So and this is, again, doesn't go to the coach, this just goes in general to the admin. I'd love if this club just sort of said, let's do, and Richard Stremsey's book, Kill for Collingwood, is great in terms of looking at a lot of this, but let's just actually go look at why this club went from 11 flags in 40 years to 4 more in the next 70 years or 80 years, or whatever it is. Something's happened. There's been a shift in the psychology there. And we know some of it was Collingwood became all about playing for the jumper, and they weren't paying players well. And there was players like Ron Todd and all that who were leaving at 21 and having distinguished VFA careers. And the VFA back then was an equivalent competition. It was, it wasn't what it is now. It became this second tier competition once the AFL was born. But you could actually go to the VFA and have a better career. We know the story of Bob Rose is considered one of Collingwood's greatest players ever. He left at 28 to go coach, what was it, some Diamond Valley club or something?
It was the Murray Valley League or something, because they offered him more money than he was ever going to earn playing for Collingwood.
Yeah, and so we know there's elements of that. Maybe Collingwood's overcompensated and just paid everyone way too much now. But, in terms of...
Even I'm getting residual checks. What's going on?
Well, but just in terms of... when Buckley resigned, he was paid out both his coaching contract and his playing contract. But in terms of who we are, we just seem to have lost a lot of our identity. And it's, who are we? What do we want to be? And I think moving forward, whoever takes over, whether this board's re-elected, whether it's Brown, or whether it's another party entirely, they really do need to look at the club and just sort of say, what do we stand for? And the new coach has to have that sort of laser focus also.
Sort of think, look, I think it's more than coincidence when you go back to the 4 people nominated for the coaching assessment, that these are also the 4 people that was sort of touted that will be preferentially hanging around despite what happens with the presidential race. That maybe they're sort of establishing the ground rules for moving forward, if that makes some sort of sense, that they're rated in that area because they believe that it's time for change. And the other thing with a few of them is that they aren't long-term Collingwood people. So Anderson, Murphy, Wright's been more than enough absent away and had a wealth of experience that he's really bringing that ruthless hardness to the club with some of the decision making lately, that it sort of feels like that's the launch platform that you can look back now, not look back now, but look towards, to say that if you are staying around, even despite the fact of what's going to change at the board, that you have enough disconnect from Collingwood to actually not sit there and promote the bluster, that you can all honestly look at each other and say, this club talks, but it doesn't deliver. Let's make it deliver. It just needs to be as simple as that.
Well,
don't buy into the hype. Don't buy into the past. It's time to just to again, like I said, refresh and start building something new for the next tier of generational supporters.
This is a discussion we've had quite a bit over the years, that Collingwood celebrates being great for the sake of celebrating being great. they're the mightiest club and all this sort of shit. And they have this self-perception of how great they are. And it's like, well, why would you strive for it if everybody keeps telling you what a fucking brilliant club you are, you know? And does that take a little bit of the edge away when it matters? Whereas you look at someone like Hawthorn, who were nobodies 40 years ago, and they had to strive and claw for every success, and they've had to earn it. And I think Collingwood needs to get back to that. It's like, you know what? You can call us the biggest club in the country when we fucking earn it. When we build our supporter base membership bigger than anyone else's, and that will come because we win flags and people will gravitate to us. I mean, you comment often enough that because you take your kids to Auskick, that, you know, you really see a decline in the amount of Collingwood jumpers compared to Hawthorn and Richmond jumpers and stuff like that. And really, you know, it's the one thing that's infuriating me with Collingwood for years is just, we just keep talking about what a great club we are. And it's like, okay, we're a club with a great history. In terms of accomplishment, we're not that great. And, you know, the people who run around going, oh, yeah, but you see finals, you see finals regularly. And it's like, well, who gives a fuck? I really don't. Yeah, you know, so what? You see finals, there's got to be some payoff. And the thing that really frustrates me is when I'm saying this, people will go, oh, would you rather Barry for Richmond? Or would you rather go for, you know, would you rather Barry for St Kilda or Footscray or something? It's like, well, why are you comparing down? Is that how you build us up? By comparing us to the lesser achieving clubs? And that just, it's like, no, come on. You know, somebody, and I've seen this a lot lately, somebody else was like mocking Carlton for they're going into the review now and all that sort of shit. And it's like, well, who gives a fuck? Look at your own backyard. It's terrible. Why are you gaining joy out of their fucking backyard? That's sort of like, that need to feel good about yourself by mocking someone else is part of the reason that we suck. It's because, hey, look at your own club and look at being the best you can be every time, and let everyone else start saying, oh, I wish we were Collingwood, because no one's fucking saying that. You know, maybe someone totally pathetic is, but, you know, most clubs are saying, I want to be Hawthorn, or right now I want to be Richmond. They're not fucking saying, I want to be Collingwood. And they're definitely, I mean, this is the one thing too I was going to say with the coach, just going back to the coach. I do wonder if prospective coaches are going to come to Collingwood and they're going to face this five-person panel, and they're going to go through all the questions and shit like that. And then their first question back to this five-person panel is, how fucked up is this salary cap? Am I going to be coaching here for 3 years under great restriction to recruit because you're paying 1.5 million for the next 3 years to other clubs and payouts to retired players and shit like that? So that is actually a concern for me, that, you know, there's going to be a great handicap on our ability to move forward in terms of the playing list.
It can't be a concern though, because Eddie said tonight on AFL 360 that there are 14 other clubs in the same salary cap dilemma. We just happened to be the one that first tackled it front on.
Okay, well, that'll bear fruit in the next.
So that should assure anyone coming in that it's already been fixed at Collingwood. Well, because the bloke who was overseeing the fuck up said it's all good now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've heard that Melbourne's the next one to face the pain. But in terms of Melbourne, I will say that, you know, I look at their list and they got, you know, McDonald and Brown and Wiedemann and Jackson, all these sort of key forwards. They got May and Lever. And it's like, well, you know what? They actually do have a surplus of talent. I mean, you look at the list we put together. We traded out Treloar, Stevenson, and Phillips. There was fucking nothing else after that. It was just like, yeah, like 17, 18 players who were sort of regular senior. It wasn't like when you get back to 2010 and you had that side take both grand finals. Meanwhile, in the reserves were sitting guys like Josh Fraser, Tarkin Lockyer, Shane O'Brien, and Paul Medhurst. And I know, you know, none of those guys would have been on huge money. But I'm saying you had like about a senior squad of about 25 established players. What we had in the last few years was an established squad of about 16, 17 players. So where the fuck was this money going? And how can we ever be sure that you're totally going to have the cap under control, given the fucking mess that's been tangled up in the last We don't know how long it's been, but speculation is it's been the last 6 years at least. So
yep.
I do.
I mean, they're reasonable questions.
I mean, I do worry that a coach is going to say, "Yep," and who's signing the contracts while I'm here? Because the one thing I'll say with Buckley that I feel for is, surely he must have not known about the salary cap being that fucked up, and at some point, the admin came down to him and said, "Hey, Bucks, how do you like your team?" "Oh, yeah, it's pretty good." "Yeah, we're going to have to get rid of about 4 of them." Depends who we pick, though. Could be 3, it could be 6. Depends on the ones you pick. And
Now,
Bucks would have said, "Well, at least we'll get something back from." "Yes, don't you worry about that. We'll get you some draft picks in the 20s.
In the meantime, here's a dartboard with some names on it and a blindfold.
Yeah. So
your throw determines the future of this club.
Yeah. So stuff like that. They got to get their whole house in order because it's all fucked up. And I'm not sold on Jeff Brown being the savior. I mean, Collingwood loves their Messiah complex. It's like, this guy's going to come in and save us. There are people on the existing football board who I wish would actually stay on the admin. The main one that that most people are aiming at is Corder, because he's been there for 14 years and he must have been complicit, or they all would, complicit in that salary cap issue. But I mean, how many of them inherited it? Like if it's been there 6 years, Paul Licuria's been there, 3 years? So how much did he walk onto the admin going, "Yeah, I'm really excited to be at Collingwood"? And someone said, "Do you realize we're paying this much of the cap and we'll be back ending it for the next 25 years just to keep it in shape?" So I would like if some of that board could actually stay. But I really feel that every component of the club needs a review, and they need to effectively reinvent themselves, because the version of them that's going around at the moment is pretty shit.
Yep.
Any final thoughts about Buckley, Collingwood, the admin, the playing list?
No, but it's for poor sods like us who do little shows about Collingwood, it's gold for the rest of the year. It's not like we're going to struggle for anything to talk about week to week. So it's going to be an interesting ride to the end of the season. And that's, simply about what can be achieved in the back half of the season. Are we going to have announcements early about the replacement coach? Would you dare announce Clarkson if you were to be successful there in July? Would you wait to the end of the year and pretend it's a secret? It's going to be an interesting watch this space, especially with all the kerfuffle going on at board level too. Because again, they've put together their task force to seek out the new Collingwood coach, but when's the EGM going to be called? If it happens in the next, mid part of the back end of the season, and there's a change in leadership then, which you would expect will happen, how does what's underway be impacted? There's a whole bunch of questions that they're going to be left unanswered. I mean, obviously this one has to be resolved, and no matter what that group would find, you'd think whether the incumbent stay or the replacement stay, they'll take the value of what that group has looked at on board and buy into that decision. But no matter what, there's going to be a lot of Collingwood spoken about in the next couple of months.
I'm assuming they're going to just conduct interviews right away. I mean, Brad Scott went to North Melbourne, or sort of left the Collingwood coaching panel. I think about
it's different with assistants though, but I think if you were to nab, go on. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, but yeah, Brad Scott left at like round 18. So obviously we're going to be conducting interviews now, concurrent to the season occurring. If they had made it, if they did the interviews over the next month and they said, "This is the guy we want," let's say it's Sam Mitchell or fucking Ross Lyon. Should the club then just go, "Well, you might as well just get fucking in the driver's seat right now. What the fuck are we waiting the next year for? Just do it. Come in round 16, 17. You can have a test drive, see what this club runs around like, and, go from there."
Yeah, that's a good point. I would certainly applaud that opportunity if it was someone that was immediately available, and that's what they decided they wanted.
So if you look at
Why
the guys,
not?
someone like Ross Lyon's definitely available. Mitchell's technically not available, but Malthouse said about Brad Scott when Brad Scott got the North job, goes, well, you might as well go because your mind's now going to be on that job. So, and that's fair enough. If Clarkson has the same opinion of Mitchell, like, well, you've got that job, your heart's not really going to be 100% here, you're going to be looking elsewhere, and they're obviously not going to make finals, so you're not really, you're not really affecting the club's fortunes. Surely they should be able to quit.
The reverse of that scenario too, that if it ends up being
or if it was Clarkson
we take that Hawthorn may make the decision to say, well, you go now, Mitchell, you're elevated, and let's see what you can do for the rest of the year.
And that's the other thing I was going to say.
Yeah.
So it'd actually be interesting because if they do make a decision, you'd think, well, I don't know when they're going to be interviewing. I don't know how much the EGM affects it. I don't know if Brown.
It shouldn't impact it at all.
But if Brown was this, let's say Collingwood said, Ross Lyon, we're going to make you our coach. And Jeff Brown, in one of his coffees with you, says, Spook, what do you think about this? And you go, fuck no. And then Jeff Brown turns around and says to Collingwood, you can't make that appointment until your board's determined, because when I'm president, I want the power to choose my own coach. I don't want to inherit a coach that you've signed for 5 years or 3 years or whatever the case is. So in terms of how much liberty does the incumbent administration have to make those decisions also?
Yeah, well, that'll be the telling question. Like as I said before, I think it comes down to a case of you. I think the 4 selected really are neutral enough that you would leverage their opinion into either solution when it comes to the board. I would think that but that's just my gut opinion, gut feel.
Okay. Well, I don't know. It'll be interesting times ahead. Does this change your tip of the Collingwood Melbourne game? You said 80 points last week, but now got halves as coach. Good old halves.
I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it 81.
Do you think he's going to do a worse job than Buckley?
No, look, I don't know. I don't think Melbourne want to go into they're on the cusp of winning a flag for the first time in 17,000 years. I don't think they're going to want to take the foot off the pedal going into the bye break. I think they'll come out fairly hard. I think it's a romantic notion to think that we'd win this week in Buck's final game, but I think it's going to be a loss. I don't think it'll be 80 points or 81 points, but it's still going to be a loss. And then he'll be clapped off the ground, and it's the end of that era, and then it's all about Tuesday morning for me.
All right, well, that's it from us. Lockdown is apparently being lifted tomorrow night, isn't
it? Yes, but we despite the fact we can go and film the Rant in a restaurant with 48 other people, I can't come to your house to film it because that's what COVID's expecting.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure what we're going to be doing come Tuesday night, but every chance we have to do this fracking Zoom thing one more time, but we'll work something out.
All right, well, that's it from us. Hope you enjoyed this.
And that's it from us. The crisis edition. I mean, how long did we waffle for in this? Because we initially said, let's just get together and talk for about 10, 15 minutes. I think that was about 4 hours ago. So,
well, do you want to record it again? Do you want to start again? Yep. And go 15 minutes.
Yeah. Sorry, I bumped the USB cable then, so I wasn't sure that I knocked it out. Thanks for persisting with us again for a long winded rant. It'll be I think you can confidently say interesting times ahead, and hopefully we can present something interesting.
Yep. Well, that's it from us. Later.
Catch and onwards and upwards.